Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ما بعد. So we stopped last week in the section of كيف تحفظ, how to memorize, and some basic points or pointers or tools or things that help us memorize whatever it is we're trying to memorize. And we stopped on number 4. So after choosing the proper time, which of course varies from person to person, the best time to memorize for you, after choosing the proper place, after choosing the proper amount, and choosing the proper, the hay'ah, I forgot the word we use for hay'ah, like positioning, almost like positioning. Some people like to stand, some people like to sit, some people need to move around, some people need to be indoors, some people need to be outdoors, some people can't be around crowds. Choosing the proper environment or hay'ah like that. After those things, the next point is tajazzu'ul mahfuz, breaking up what you memorize, which is almost like, I think we did touch on this already before, to break it in parts, that everything doesn't have to be memorized all at once. Yeah, I think we did speak about that, right? And that's what the author says, Hafidhullah. He says makan. He says qadr, yeah, qadr munasib. So he says, and this, we go back to what we spoke about previously, as he says, وَهَذِي يَعُودُ لِمَا سَبَقَ الْكَلَامُ عَنْهُ. That goes back to what we spoke about. That if it's something that is tawil, something long, even if it's short, that it's not a necessity that everything has to be done in one shot. And he gives an example here that if he says, if the mu'allif, if the author of the book, for example, مثلا, he said, if you wanted to memorize a book of fiqh, And the author, he made the chapter of Tahara, قَدْ جَعْلَ لِلطَّهَارَ أَرْبَ أَسْطُرٍ. He made the chapter of purification in the 4 lines, right? وَجَعْلَ لِلصَّلَاةِ عَشْرَ أَسْطُرٍ. And he made the salat, the chapter of salat, 10 lines. He says, you could break it down into, as he says, for Arba Astur Tahara, that might be easy, right, for a person. 4 lines might not be that bad. He says, but when you get to Salat, which is 10 lines, he says, قَدْ جَعْلَ لِلصَّلَاةِ عَشْرَ أَسْطُرٍ وَحِفْظُهَا كَامِلًا قَدْ يَشُقَّ عَلَيْكِ. It might be a little more difficult because it's a longer portion. It does necessitate that because you did the first 4 lines all together, maybe in one sitting, that you have to do the next 10 lines all together in one sitting. There's no pressure in that area. It's room. It's room based on what's easy. He says, in that case, you break it down. You break the 10 lines down. And he says, وَلَا تَقُولْ سَأَحْفَظْ فَصْلًا كَامِلًا. He said, you don't have to say, I'm going to memorize the whole portion at once. It's not necessary. It's not a necessity to do that. It could be that that chapter is longer than 10 lines. It could be 2 pages. And it might make it a little difficult on a person. It might not be that easy on them. He says, the important thing, the more you break it down, the stronger it should be in your memory. The stronger it should be in your memory. So if it is 4 lines, and you said, I'm just going, even though it's 4 lines, I'm just going to do 2 lines in this setting and make sure it's super strong. Just make sure that I memorize it without any mistakes, and I want it to be extra strong. So I'll just take 2 lines and not even a 4. Somebody else might come and say, well, I'm just going to take 1 line. I'm going to just take 1 line, right? There is no limit set on it. There's no limit set on it. But the chapter is to break it down to make sure that a person can make sure that what they're memorizing is solid in their memory. As they say, that it's engraved in their memory. And he also says, and this is another trick from the shaitan, don't say, وَلَا تَقُولْ سَتَأَخَّرْ فِي الْحِفْظِ. I'm gonna memorize it later. Well, I can't do the whole thing, so I'm gonna make sure I want to do all 10 lines at once. So I'm gonna just do them all at once, but I'm not gonna do it today. And then a person puts it off and delays it. He said, فَالتَّأَخُّرُ مَعَ رُسُوخِ الْحِفْظِ أَفْضَلُ مِنَ التَّعَجُّلِ. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't say that by not memorizing the whole chapter, that it's going to slow you down in your head. For example, what we used to do, what some people do, you say, we're going to memorize this book this week because we're off from school. We got a 2-week break from school. So in that 2 weeks, we count the days in, right? It might be 2 weeks and some change. School doesn't start back until this date. We got 14 days, right? We say in those 14 days, you're going to memorize these 2 things, whatever you want to memorize. So that means in order to finish in 14 days, you have to read, mathalan, you have to memorize 6 hadith a day, right? For example, whatever the number is. You have to memorize 6 hadith a day in order to be finished in 14 days. So now what happens? You get to a hadith that's longer than the other hadith. Some of the hadith might be short. But then you get to some of them they're long. Right? So when a person gets to the hadith that's long, they try to jam it and cram it in order to stay on track. And then the excuse for doing it will be, if I don't memorize these 6 today, it's going to put me behind on the program. Everybody with me? Clear? If a person thinks like that, Sheikh's saying that to be behind on the program, if you're behind on the program, but what's memorized is memorized strong, it's strong in your memory, and you're behind, but it's strong in your memory, that's better than just staying on program in which you memorize this week. You can't really You memorize with mistakes, you can't really recall it like that. It's better to be behind, but the memory is thabit, it's strong, it's firm in your memory, than to just blow through it and you really don't have it memorized like that. That's why he says, being off of the program, delaying or being behind with a strong memory is better than it's better than being on pattern, but the memory, which you memorized is weak. Clear? So the point is that it's not always necessarily how much. The point of memorizing, the benefit of memorizing is that it sticks. And some say that when you want to memorize something, it depends on how long you want it to last, how long you want it to stay in your memory. And then they'll gauge how many times you need to read it. How long you want to memorize it real quick for tomorrow for a test or something? Or you want it to stick for 10 years? You want to stick for the rest of your life? You want to stick for 20? How long do you want the information to stay? And then they'll say, if you want it to stay for this amount of years, read it this amount of times.
The gauge, when you were saying that one of the things in one of the sheets, they recommended reading everything over 5 days span. You said something like you said, repeat it or recite it or go over it over 5 days. Was that only pertaining to Quran or is that anything?
Anything that you memorize. The example was for Quran, but anything that you memorize. That sometimes you got to go back and revisit it just to make sure that you're pronouncing it correctly. Make sure you're not missing a vowel, make sure you're not missing a letter, make sure you're not leaving anything out, right? So if you memorize 5 juz, for example, 5 parts of the Quran, if you read a juz every 5 days, then how strong is that going to be? Right? That means you're completing that. Everything that you memorize from the Quran, you complete it every 5 days. Every 5 days you complete 5 juz. So that means in a month you did it at least 4 times, at least. A lot of times in the HIP programs, they might say, they might take 2 days off. They might take off Saturday and Sunday, right? So even if you did it just during the week, if you did that 4 weeks in a month, then you'd finish it at least 4 times, right? 4 times 12, 48 times a year, right? It's going to be fathom, it's going to be strong there. It's just like you looking at the page. You done read it so many times. But that's not just for the Quran, that's for anything that you want to go back and revisit it. Everything might not need to be revisited so often. Maybe some things you need to read after you lock it in and you memorize it. You might have to go back twice a month. Right? Everybody's different. Depending on the book, depending on the word, depending on the language. Maybe it's a higher level book where the language is just a little more difficult. If it's simple language that it sticks with you easy, you might only have to go once a month. If the language is a little more difficult in the book, you might have to go twice a month or 3 times a month. You know what I mean? It says the next thing is واحد النسخة التي تحفظ منها. Whatever book that you decide, for example, if you look at the Mus'haf, when they say a copy, the wording of the book is the same. It's not that the words change in the book, especially the Quran. It's the same, the words are the same. But the print is different. The print is different, meaning this copy, the print, like we use in the computer. So the font might be a little bigger in this one than it is in that one. If the font is bigger, that means you get less on the page, right? So if you're memorizing, you want to stick to one copy. You want to stick to the same thing, because eventually the picture becomes part of your memory here. So as he talks about that rasm al-ahruf, the way the letters are written. وَبَدْءُ الصَّفْحَةِ, what's the first word on the page? Right? What's the last word on the page? What's the first word on the next page? That kind of thing. When you have the same, when you read from the same book constantly, the same print, because, not the same book, because this is the same book. Right? This is the Quran, this is the Quran. It's 2 different prints. Right? So which print you want to use? You say, I'm going to memorize, I'm going to use this one. Stick with that. Why? Because the font could be different, which means the page doesn't start with the same word. This word starts on the first line in this copy. And in this copy, the same word, that same sentence starts on the second line. That can throw off your memory. It can throw off the picture that's going to be in your brain. Once you read it enough times, if you ever seen somebody, they can tell you, or like today the brother said, when I heard the ayat in the khutbah, I knew it was a mistake. You can hear it, just something, it doesn't sound right. And that's what happens when your memory gets thrown off. You're used to reading from one, and then you switch to another one, and you say something's wrong, I read that wrong. You look at it, it's because it's not exactly the same. The picture here needs to be the same picture in front of you in order to keep it strong. And he says specifically, he says the point of that is with repetition, reading that same copy over and over and over. He says the natija رسوخ ذلك في ذهنك حتى تصير كأنك تنظر فيها عند قراءتك لها. When you do that, the result is going to be, when you recite it, whatever you're reciting from memory, it's going to be as if you're looking at the page in your brain, right? And that just happens with repetition. There's no superpower or nothing like that. The more you read it, the more you read something, it becomes here, right? If you read it enough times. And most people, they can't, once or twice is not enough, right? You say 20, at least. That's on the way of the Imam al-Haram in Medina, Sheikh Abdul Musa Qasim. He has a book where he advises like that. Read the ayah, read each ayah at least 20 times. And then read the next ayah 20 times, and read the next ayah 20 times. Once you get about halfway down the page, then read those 5 or 6 ayah together 20 times. Right? At that point, you might have read the ayah over 100 times. You with me? So, using the same copy, the same print of the book that you're using is gonna help with the memory. It becomes like a picture. And that's why sometimes you see people who memorize the Quran, they can tell you, that's at the middle of the page. They're discussing the surah, they say, no, it starts in the middle of the page. Look in the middle of the page, right? It's from using the same copy. It's like transferring it from the paper here, because you use the same one so much. If you switch it, it throws the whole thing off. One line can throw off your whole thing. So that's why it's important to use the same copy. And this is not restricted to, for example, even any book you pick up. There's always, not always, but a lot of times there's what do you call it? They have the first edition, then they have the second edition, then they have the third edition, right? It's the same information, but when you look at it, what's on page 22 in the first edition is not on page 22 in the second edition. It's different. They're on different pages, even though it's the same information. So when you go, if you're not paying attention, you say, I lost my book. Then you do what? You go buy another one. They use the same cover, the same everything. So you assume it's the same book, the same one that you had. You didn't know it was the second print, right? So you doing what? You remember on page 23, it was talking about the meaning of shirk. That's on page 23 at the top of the page, because you done read the book so much, right? When you go to page 23 and it's not there, it throws it off. Is this the same book that I had? You with me? It's more like that. When you memorize, it's even better because it sticks in the memory better. طيب. This one is a little more specific to Arabic books. More specific to Arabic books. شكل المتن الذي تحفظه تشكيلا لغويا. That basically, before I forget, that's yours. All of those are yours. That, for those who know Arabic, some books have vowels, and some books don't have vowels, right? Like, of course, the Mus'haf, the Quran, has all the vowels in it. But if you're memorizing, for example, a book of fiqh, or maybe a book of hadith, depending on what print you buy, it doesn't have the vowels in it. What you don't want to do is start memorizing without the vowels. is then you memorize something, then you got to go back and fix it if it's not grammatically correct. So either A, you want to buy the print that has all of the vowels on it, or B, before you start memorizing, you want to make sure you go through and put all of the vowels on everything. And my question is, how you know which vowel to put on what? Knowledge, or you got to go somebody who knows. Read it on them, and then you read it to them, and they'll correct you and tell you where to put the vowels go. Where to put the vowels go. He says, so before you start memorizing the book, you should make sure you read it with the vowels on it before you start memorizing. Because you don't want to, one of the hardest things is to memorize something. After you memorize it, read it, you might have read something 100 times. It's stuck, right? You read it 100 times wrong, incorrect. Right? Now you got to come behind it. You might have to read the next one more than that to make it stick correctly. So before you start the memorization, that you want to make sure that it's properly, as he says, lugawiyan, that it's grammatically correct in the language. That's grammatically correct in the Arabic language. Which is an encouragement to A, learn Arabic, and to B, learn grammar. So that you're able to sort those things out yourself. And 3, C, to buy, when you buy books, that you buy a good print, a good copy. All of that counts. Everything counts. Next he says, Darbitan. And we do this a lot, but there's no problem in doing it when you talk about Islamic knowledge either. He says, Mustalah al-Halfiyan. And this is basically, as he says, you know how sometimes you're reading something, and you know how you're reading something, right? You always make a mistake at the same spot, right? It's possible. You read it a million times, you always mess up right there, right? He says that you make some type of sign for yourself. This is all to help and make stuff stick, make sure you understand what we're doing. And he gives an example. He says it's possible that you make the same mistake a lot on the same page or the same thing that you're trying to memorize. Right? So he gives the example, and we kind of use them. They use them in Arabic too, acronyms. Right? It's kind of like that. Acronym. So you make up things in order to help you retain the information. So you might put this initial, whatever the case may be, right? Like IMFC. Or you take the I and then IMFC stands for Imam Muslim Family Center, but you take that acronym IMFC and use it for something else, right? You can take IMFC and use it for something that has nothing to do with Imam Muslim Family Center. You can take it and use it for something else, right? But it's going to help you. It might not benefit anybody else but you, which is fine. That's who it's for. You know what I'm saying? It's for you. It's for your benefit. So he says, an example is, if someone were to ask, and this is in the subject of tajweed, the rules of reciting the Quran, كم حروف الإدغام بالغنة? How many letters are there for idgham بالغنة? Right? He said, if you start running off the letters, how many letters is it? He said, it's possible you skip a letter. You try to just memorize, you try to just recall the letters just from here. You know how we do. Did I say that one already? Hold up. You said that one twice, hold up. So we already got, you go through all that. You already got that, you gotta keep doing that, right? But they make an acronym with the letters that if you say this word, they put all of the letters and they make it into a word. Right? They take all the letters and they make it into one word. So somebody asks you the letters of idgham, that all you have to do is remember the word, one word, which includes all of the letters. You with me? Which is easier, it's just a tool that makes it easier to remember things. Right? So he says, لو قلت هي 4 حروف مجموعة في كلمة يرملون انتهى الأمر. If you were to say, well, there's 4 letters and it's contained in the statement yarmalun, yarmalun. That's the word they put together. Yarmalun, right? Which contains ya, ra, mim, lam, waw, nun. Which is how many? 6. Like, Idgham Bigunna has 2 sections. One Bigunna, Idgham has Idgham Bigunna, and this Tajweed, Idgham Bighayr Bigunna. 6 for the, it's 6 and they break into 2 sections. One section has 4, one section has 2. But with one word, you got both sections together. You get it? That's the idea. So the idea is that you get to some point where you always make a mistake in something. How do you fix it? There's no problem in doing something like that. It's not like it's, anything wrong with it. It's a learning tool that everybody uses. There's no problem with that. طيب. Number 9, and this one is important. تعويد النفس على الحفظ وعدم الانقطاع عنه. To train yourself to memorize and to never stop. Because a problem with stopping is it's difficult to get started again. A lot of times the most difficult part is to start. Once you start, you get in the groove, the ease comes. Right? Just like they say with working out. I don't know, but that's what they say. Once you get on your program, it's easy. Not easy to work out, but the body become accustomed to time, getting up, going, right? But in the beginning, it's just getting there, right? A lot of times it's just getting to the place. It might not be difficult, but just to get up and go do it might be the hardest part, right? So to train the nafs, because generally we like to relax. We like to do what we want to do, right? Sometimes we like to do what we want to do, and we don't want to do what we need to do, right? So in order to do what you need to do, it takes a little more effort, right? I don't feel like doing that. If I can miss it, I'm going to miss it. I'll just pick it up another time, right? So to train yourself to memorize, because memorizing is not something that is just, it takes work, it takes time, it takes patience. You sitting there or you standing, however you comfortable. You find your place, you sitting, you standing, you walking around, whatever you want to do. If you're sitting in that spot for an hour at a time, reading the same thing over and over and over and over and over, right? Read it over and over and over and over and over. You might read it 50, 60 times and you still don't have it. It's still not solid. I mean, you got to keep reading it, right? So it takes patience. That's why I say you have to train yourself to memorize and don't stop. To memorize and don't stop. He said, فَالنَّفْسْ كُلَّمَا عَوَّدْتَهَا عَلَى أَمْرٍ اعْتَادَتْ عَلَيْهِ. The more you train yourself to do something, then you become used to doing it. It becomes a normal pattern for you. The more you do it, it becomes normal, it becomes easier. Of course, in the beginning, it's always that struggle in getting started. But the more you do it, then the soul becomes accustomed to doing it, and it's easier to do it. Not that it's easy, it's easier, and it gets easier till you like doing it. And now you don't want to stop, you don't want to miss it, right? He says, and this is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الْعِلْمَ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ. That knowledge, a person doesn't learn, knowledge doesn't just pop up in it, and not like, it comes by what? Learning. All them scholars that we know and love, they didn't just, it's not overnight. They've been, they 70, they may be 70 years old. They've been teaching for 40 years. Teaching for 40 years. Teaching for 30 years, they've been teaching. Let alone what they studied, how long they were studying. You with me? Whole life dedicated to worship. Studying for how many years? Then start teaching. And because you're teaching, doesn't mean you're not studying. It ain't like you're teaching, you don't study, no. Right? So you figure that it gets to a point where it becomes easier and easier and easier. And then it's not about it being easy, it's about the love for it now. Now the love is so strong for it that a person doesn't want to stop. They don't want to stop that thing. So it says, the Prophet said that ilm, knowledge comes by learning, which of course doesn't happen overnight, like Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri rahimahullah said, من رام علم جملة ذهب عنه جملة وإنما العلم يطلب على المر أيام وليالي. That whoever tries to get knowledge all in one sitting, they try to learn everything all at once, that they lose that knowledge all at once. It's not how people learn. It's not realistic. And then he said, knowledge is learned over days and nights. And that's the benefit of reading biographies, to see how the scholars and famous imams of the Sunnah of Islam, how did they reach that level that the whole Islamic world, no matter what country you go to in the world, all of the Muslims in the world recognize this man, recognize this woman for her knowledge or for his knowledge in Islam. How does that happen? What did they do? And you read their biographies, you see what they did. You see what they were known for. You see how their memory was. What did the people that they lived in society, what did they know him for? What were they known for? That's why when they asked him, Ahmed, he was, at that time, he was the imam. Not just the imam of the masjid, the imam of the Muslims. Everybody knew Imam Ahmed. People traveling to sit with Imam Ahmed. And he still had the look. He was the sheikh, he was the teacher, but he still had the look of the student. He looked like from the students. He was carrying the inkwell, he was carrying the pen, but that specific type of pen was not for people of his caliber. Those were for the younger students, but he was still carrying it around. Even though he wasn't on the level he was on, when they asked him about it, why are you carrying that? And that's for the tulab, that's for the small students now, it's not for you. And he said, I'm gonna be carrying this until I go in the grave. Even though he's teaching, that he's still studying, still reviewing, still going over issues. So because he's teaching, doesn't mean he's not still studying and going over other issues. Tayyib. He says, some of the ulama said, and this is under the chapter of memorizing and not stopping. They will say, كنت أحفظ باليوم ولو سطرا واحدا حتى لا أنقطع عن الحفظ. He said, I used to memorize in a day at least one line, just so that I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't get used to not memorizing. You with me? Once you start memorizing, whether it's Quran, Hadith, a lot of times the beginning, the initial start point is where you get the most stress. Once you get into a groove, you'll be surprised what you can do. Once you get into a groove, you'll be surprised with the capability of the brain. And you'll be surprised how you remember things that you didn't even know you remembered. Right? We can think right now, I'm sure, if a car rides down the street, right? And it's just the reality. If a car rides down the street playing a song from 20 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, even if you haven't heard it in 15 years, right? You listened to that so many times at the time that if you heard it 15 years later, it's still there. And that stuff does no benefit to us, right? That's something that brings no benefit to us. It might be a sin, right? What pops in the head, the lyrics that we read, it might be sinful. But the reality is, and the point I'm making is, it's stuck. How many times you rewind it and listen to it, right? If we can memorize that garbage, then there's no excuse that we can't memorize things that are better, right? The best speech, especially in Quran. But it came from what? How many times did a person hear that? To be able to remember it 15 years later, 20 years later, without hearing it for 15 to 20 years. That when you hear it again, it's like it never left. That means you heard that numerous times. Repetition. And it's the same thing. Repetition, 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 so that it sticks. So he said we would memorize, even if it was one line a day, just so that we would never stop memorizing, so that we didn't get used to not memorizing. And that is because, as he says, the nafs, everybody, the soul has a limits to it. And the soul has a thought of how much you can hold, how much can you bear, how much can you do. You don't really know until you put all your effort forward and try it. You gotta really push yourself. You be patient, and it's gonna be rough. It's gonna be rough at the beginning. But the more you push yourself, you see how much you can really bear. Tayyib. He says number 10, and this is important, in this one it brings the benefit of having good people around you. And having people around you that you see to be stronger than you. Or at least on your level to help you. He says sometimes أحيانا إذا حفظ الإنسان شيئا من العلم قد لا يستطيع أن يثبته بنفسه. It's possible that you're trying to memorize something, or you're trying to understand something, but it's difficult to do it on your own, right? But if you get another brother to sit with you, y'all go over it together, or you get a sister to sit with you, y'all go over it together. The sister gets a sister to sit with her. So they go over together. He says, كَانَ ذَلِكَ أَنْفَعْ لَهُ. That might be better for him. And this is what we find as he says that Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما, كان يخرج مع مجاهد. He used to go out with Mujahid ويقول, he would say, يا مجاهد اقرأ علي وأقرأ عليك. He would say, Mujahid, you read this to me and then I'm going to read it to you from memory. Right? From memory. Nothing in. You read, for example, let me hear you out of Fatiha. You listen, maybe you got a mistake. Right? That's what it's for. You read to somebody to make sure you don't have a mistake. You go back and check every so often, like we're talking about. You go back twice a month, or 3 times a month, or once every 2 months to make sure you don't have a mistake. It's not like we memorize something and it's impossible for us to read it wrong. That's not the reality. We're human. It's possible that, yeah, you memorized it, your memorization is strong, you still make a mistake. Right? How many times you pray behind somebody, and of course they memorize the surah, and they read something wrong. Somebody in the salah got to correct it. It's memorized, but it happens. It happens. So he said that they would go out and he would say, Mujahid, you read such and such to me, and then I'll read this to you. And you basically check each other. And for that to happen, for that to happen, it has to be a good relationship between the people. Because we live in a time now, everybody's sensitive. Men sensitive. Like women, sensitive. Meaning, if I say something to you, you think I'm trying to check and see how much you know, right? Instead of being brothers, right? And or instead of thinking I want good for you, let's check each other, right? Let's check each other. I'm not trying to, what you trying to see what I know, what I don't know. You know what I'm saying? The guards is up. I'm trying to check me to see if I really know it, right? When really is a benefit for both of us. Because it's possible that I'm reading it wrong. So when I hear you read it, what do I say to myself? That don't sound right. Why? Because it doesn't sound like the way I read it. So now I got to say to you, all right, you made a mistake right here. You said this. He says, that's what it is. You say, I've been reading it wrong the whole time. Right? It's not about me showing you that I know more than you, or trying to see if you know more than me. That's not the issue. The issue is the same way Abdullah ibn Abbas and Mujahid, that they did to check. You read on me, I read on you. And this is something that it takes heart. You can't be scared to let people know what you don't know. A lot of times we're scared to let people know we don't know something, right? If I say, let me hear a story such and such. Oh man, I memorized that a long time. I gotta read it. Yeah, pride, right? Instead of saying that, I never memorized that. You didn't memorize that? What do you think? You didn't memorize that? I'm gonna grind you up. Oh, you're supposed to know that. I didn't memorize that. And it's not a grind up session. If you did, well, let's go over it, because I memorized such and such story. We can go over it now. Right? We scared, we think somebody's gonna invade on us and say, oh, you supposed to, nah. Let me hear such and such. Either I know it or I don't. Whatever I know, I gotta be comfortable enough, number one, to read it to you. I trust that you really want good for me, so I read it to you. Right? But the relationship has to be strong enough. Everybody's not gonna do that. Everybody can't do that with everybody. It takes people with good relationships to be able to sit down and say, listen, let's go over this. We got 30 minutes to the event. Let's go over this. See how much we can read before the event is called, or whatever the case may be. He said, وَذَلِكَ مِنْ بَابِ تَرْسِيخِ الْحِفْظِ فِي ذِهْنِهِمَا. It helps both people. It helps both people. And I experienced this a lot of times. I thought I was reading something right, and then I heard somebody else read it, and I said, mine don't sound like that. And I'm looking at it, and I had to hear it again and again and again, and I was reading it wrong. Long time, reading it wrong. I'm reading it wrong all the time. Could be a whole letter changed. Could be a vowel, could be one, could be anything. But the benefit is that everybody doesn't sound like you. So when you hear somebody else read it, it sounds a little different. It doesn't mean you have to sound exactly the same, but what's on the page is on the page. If y'all memorize the same thing, it should be the same words, right? It should be the same vowels on it. Everything should be the same. It don't have to be the same voice, the same speed and all of that, but it should be the same information that is memorized. So he says, if you did that and you knew that someone could help you, this will be something after seeking the Lord's help, of course, first. After seeking the Lord's help first, that you read to a person, and they say, read on. They say, read on, let me read on you. Read on you mean, you listen and check and see if I have any mistakes. So I say, for example, let me read this on you. You look at the page, and I sit back and I read from memory. And when I make a mistake, you stop me. Go back. Right? All right, I'm done. Dad, I have 4 mistakes. All right, you read on me. Now you want to read on me. Dad, you get the whole thing. Alhamdulillah. Right? There got to be some type of relationship there for people to be comfortable enough to make mistakes in front of people. And that's something that, like you said, we got to remove the pride. The pride is that I don't want anybody to know what I don't know. Pride. When nobody wakes up a scholar. People don't wake up like that. Nobody wakes up a scholar. It takes time. Knowledge, it takes time. But we'll stop there. Inshallah ta'ala, unless there's any questions. If there's no questions, I'll say for our brother who just took Shahada that everything takes time. It's not overnight. Some things are more important than other things, right? Some things are everything's important, but some things are more important. And you want to start with the things that are most important, right? Things that are the most important. But you got some good guys with you, inshallah. So inshallah, you'll be all right. But don't think that you obligated to know everything tomorrow. That's not realistic. It's not realistic. It just don't work like that. But the obligation is trying, pushing yourself to try to learn the basics that you need to worship as a Muslim every day. And there's some basic things that can be done. And how fast and how long does it take, it depends on the person. Everybody learns different. Everybody retains information different. You understand what I'm saying? But you can't beat yourself and think you're going to know everything tomorrow and somebody asks you a question. You got to be, all of us, not just you. Everybody has to be comfortable saying, I don't know. I don't know. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, everybody knows the story of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, that a man traveled a month. It took him a month to go there to meet him. It took him a month to get there. He wanted to ask Imam Malik some questions, rahimahullah. He traveled for a month's time. It took him a month's time to travel. It would take us 2 hours to get to New York. Okay? Maybe less than that if we really pushed it. Right? DC, ball up and down the East Coast. He traveled for a month. Not to make no money. Not to meet no women. He wasn't trying to get married. He traveled to ask questions about the deen, Islamic questions. He had to ask questions. He had 40 questions to ask, and they said, Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he answered. This is the Imam. This is not like a regular Imam of the Masjid. This is the Imam of Medina. When people go to Medina, they got to go see Imam Malik. He's the Imam of this Medina, the city. People traveling all across the world. He traveled 30 days to get there. He got a list of questions. Imam Malik answers 4 questions. 3 or 4 questions, something like that. In the other 36 or so, he says, like, I don't know, Imam Malik. So it should show us that we have to be comfortable not being ignorant, not continuing not knowing. But if we don't know something, there's no shame in saying, I don't know. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. I don't know. The man said to Imam Malik, rahimahullah, who was at the time the Imam. When we say Imam, in this case, it's not just like the Imam of the Masjid here or the Imam of the Masjid there. No. In this case, it's more like, sometimes you had imams, he was the Imam of the country. Imam Malik at the time was still the Imam of Medina. So people go to Medina, they go to that city, you gotta go see the shit. You gotta go see Imam Malik. If you got questions, see Imam Malik, ask me questions. The man said, I'm gonna have to go back and tell my people that Imam Malik doesn't know. Everybody thought Imam Malik knew, right? I come with 40 questions, you answer 3 or 4, 36 you don't know. I'm gonna have to go tell everybody, basically, he's not who we thought he was. He didn't know 36 questions out of 40. What did Imam Malik say? Yeah, tell him. Tell him I ain't know. There's no harm, there's no shyness in not knowing something. That's not the aib, as they say. Laysa al-aib, laysa al-jahl aiban. That ignorance, not knowing, ignorant meaning not knowing something is not what is embarrassing. It's nothing embarrassing about not knowing. Lakin al-aib, al-israr al-jahl. But what is embarrassing, a person should be embarrassed that I continue not knowing. I know I don't know, but I ain't trying to learn it. So years go by, and I still don't know the same thing I know last year. I didn't make any improvement. That's a problem. But of course, you don't learn everything overnight. So it's not an overnight type of thing. You can't think you're going to wake up tomorrow and know everything for any of us. But it's time. It takes time. And if we really try to learn, it's going to take patience. But it's some things that are more important than other things. And you want to start with the things that are the most important. Hopefully a lot of that, inshallah, will be helpful. Inshallah. If that's it, we'll stop there until next week, inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.